Hi, everybody. I'm Caryn Hartglass, and you're listening to It's All About Food. I hope you're having a good day today. And I thank you very much for tuning in and joining me for my conversation today with the very wonderful, lovely, awesome Victoria Moran.
Well, very wonderful, lovely, awesome, Caryn Hartglass. Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Let me just ask, can you hear my neighbor's dog barking?
No.
Okay, good. It's a problem. I so want to help this dog, and so far it hasn't happened.
Yeah, there's only so much we can do when it comes to other people and what they do with their lives and with the other lives that they control, unfortunately.
Because that's a really important point.
Before we get into your newest book, and you have like a gazillion other books, Age Like a Yogi, A Heavenly Path to a Dazzling Third Act. Did you want to continue on this subject of controlling other people's lives?
Well, let's see. Aging
Especially
like
from a yogi perspective, because we want to do no harm, right? And we want to do whatever we can. That's in your book, even where you might not intuitively do something because you know it might upset someone else, but ultimately to do the greatest good.
As I understand yogic teachings, the real gist is coming to know who we are, which is this internal, eternal quality, which is pure love. And that quality, that essence, is what connects us to all other beings. And so, on the one hand, you could say, well, yoga is just about self-development, seeking enlightenment, coming to know who you are, coming to know God. But because that essence of who we are is love, we also have this affinity and this responsibility to all other forms that love is taking on earth at this time. So, of course, for people who are sensitive, and I kind of think that people who are sensitive are maybe a little bit more spiritually evolved than people who aren't. And so our hearts go out to other people and other beings. And as you were saying, we can't change other people unless what they're doing happens to be against the law, which is, I think, the part of what we do in the world of animal rights and activism and working on legislation and things like that. Because part of me is like, oh, that's not yogic at all. Well, yes, it is. Because then you look at Mahatma Gandhi, who used these beautiful principles of truth and harmlessness to free a country. Yeah, there's a place for all of it. And we got off on all this because my neighbor works a lot and her dog barks a lot and my heart breaks. And yet, there's only so many times you can say, how about if your dog visited me a couple of hours a day?
Yeah.
And for them to respectfully decline. It's tough.
Well, especially we both live in New York City, in apartment buildings, and I know a lot of people like to have their companion animals there. I don't know if it's the right place for many animals that live in New York City, but it is what it is.
It is what it is. And I think acceptance is a big deal because even though the book that I've written is about yoga philosophy, and I was introduced to yoga philosophy when I was 17, I'm now 74, so that's been a while. But I'm also in a couple of 12-step programs, and I know from that acceptance is the answer to all of your problems. Because when we can accept the way things are right now, then maybe we can change them. Before we accept them, we can't even change them. So acceptance first, and then we see what we can do about how stuff's looking out there.
So that's an underlying principle of acceptance.
Yeah, it's this whole kind of way of bringing in universal principles, kind of cosmic stuff that really appeals to people who are, quote, into spiritual things, end quote, and very much turns off oftentimes people who are not. And yet I think all of us, regardless of worldview, every day translate large principles and large ideas into very practical actions. So, for example, I believe in ahimsa. I believe in reverence for life. Ahimsa, nonviolence, is at the heart of being vegan. It's also the first moral precept of yoga. So, yesterday afternoon, my daughter is over and she says, "Look, you have a bug on your wall." And I looked, and she said, "Well, it's not one of the bad ones. You know, here in New York City, one of the bad ones means anybody in the roach family. And it sort of looks like a ladybug, but it's not." It's like, okay. So out I go, put the cup over the bug and the paper underneath. And I live at the end of a hallway. And so I go down to the elevator. And then I go to the second floor where we have a courtyard, and I go out the back door and find some good grass and leaves and take the bug. So that cosmic idea of ahimsa gets very concrete in the bug in the cup outside. It's really a lovely way to live. You know that there's a good chance of whoever you come in contact with, they're going to be better off because they came in contact with you than somebody of bug stomping mentality.
And it's such a natural reaction, or at least something we've been maybe ingrained to do, just like slap it and kill it and be done with it.
Yeah, certainly I've done that.
I've done it.
Mosquitoes are not high on my list of creatures that I appreciate. And we are human and we are living in this world. None of us is going to be perfect. We can't help everybody. We can't save everybody. But the idea, just like that definition of veganism from the Vegan Society UK, that wherever it is possible and practicable, I love that very British word, practicable, we go the extra mile for a fellow being. Because again, back from yoga, we're really the same, having these different manifestations and different experiences.
I just want to linger a moment on this acceptance idea because I think it is so important, foundational, and I'm just experiencing it like every other minute. I know that I came to that philosophy definitely when I was going through my cancer journey about 18 years ago. And I don't know where it came from. It could have come from things that I read that seeped into my consciousness, or maybe it was the universal consciousness, or maybe I just thought it up myself. I don't know. I'm not taking all the credit for it. But accepting and move on is something that I say all the time. And I know people who find it very difficult to do that, and they resist. And the opposite of accepting is resisting. And it takes so much energy to resist. And resisting doesn't feel good. Now, I'm not talking about resisting when it comes to politics, and we'll talk about that maybe later, because we have to accept our current situation, either internally with health or externally with our society. And from there, we can decide how to move on. And that moving on might include some sort of rebellion or something. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about resisting reality, resisting your situation is not a good thing.
Well,
And
it's true. And when you can't accept it, because I'm going through stuff, as you know, my husband has been hospitalized half a dozen times in the past 5 years, and he has aphasia, which is difficulty speaking. And because I just live in a world of words, I don't do music, I don't do art, I don't do math or technology. Words are just how I perceive the world. And now it's difficult when I'm having a conversation with my husband just to kind of get the words across to him, and he tries to find the right words to talk to me. So it's very difficult. And I haven't been accepting very well at all. And you know how we are looking online for everything, and it is kind of weird. Sometimes I think has AI sort of taken the place of prayer in the lives of many. I need some guidance here. Click, click, click. One, I've learned there's a condition, and I guess it's more often diagnosed in children, but it certainly seems like it can affect adults too, that they call, I think it's not acceptance disorder, but it's like adaptation disorder or something. And what it means is
Mm,
something happens in your life that would be hard for anybody, but some people can just kind of just like, all right, well, this is the new normal, on we go. And some people, and I must admit it's been me, oh, it's like, no, no, not this, because last month
mm,
was better. And, I'm not asking for miracles. I'm not saying take me back to 1982. I'm just saying, like, let's just back up a little bit to where
mm.
things were easier. But like you say, that just causes so much angst. And what I'm coming to in my own personal life is just seeing the situation differently and choosing to find the parts of it that are sweet and
Mm.
that do underlie the fact that I know, and I've written about this. My biggest book was called Creating a Charmed Life. And I really have had a charmed life, in so many ways. Haven't been seeing that lately, but like you say, with the acceptance and the willingness to just shift and put on other glasses, maybe rose-colored even, sometimes really necessary.
Yes, and as we age, and this book is called Age Like Yogi, as we age, for many people, things get more complicated in their personal lives, but also with their friends and family. And this acceptance and move on thing is just so prevalent, more so than many people when they're younger, where it's just like, I can do it all, I can do everything, and the world is my oyster, and maybe not the right expression. Is there a
Yeah,
vegan, is
yeah,
there a
I
vegan
never
version of
never
that?
understood, even pre-vegan, exactly what that meant. We should look it up. We'll ask AI. Yeah, I think that aging is interesting because we've never done it before, at least not that we know of. Of course, as a yogi, I believe in reincarnation, so maybe we've done it lots of times.
Mm.
But it's the kind of thing that we can have empathy for children. We can have empathy for people who share other aspects of our lives with us because we relate that way. And and we want to be kind, I mean, certainly to older people, but we haven't been there, so we don't really know what it's like. And I think now, with some of the things that I'm dealing with William, and I'm feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm just, I'm so overwhelmed. Anybody that's ever gotten involved with the healthcare system, and there's so many appointments and schedules, and this
Almost
whole
makes you want to kill somebody,
well,
right?
it does. And this thing about, medicine, well, number one, there's only one choice in this country. You
Mm.
get allopathic medicine because that's the one that there is. And it wasn't always that way. Historically, there used to be homeopathic doctors and hospitals, osteopathy. My dad was an old-time osteopath, and
Mm.
he came in just as osteopaths were becoming medical doctors and were doing drugs and surgery. But prior to that, that had been its own special discipline. And in India, there are, I believe it's 3,000 Ayurvedic hospitals and several
Wow.
million Ayurvedic physicians. So there really is a choice of a different way. And here there's not. And there's all the specialization. So I think about my dad. He was ear, nose, and throat, but he could set your broken leg. He could deliver your baby.
Mm.
He could take out your appendix. I mean, he was a doctor. That's what doctors did. And now they can't even advise you on a part of the body that isn't their specialty. So it just makes it very complicated and lots of, juggling all kinds of things. And I have been reminded more often than I would like of that old advertisement. If anybody is old enough to remember the 70s and 80s, Calgon, take me away, as a bath additive TV commercial. And
Mm.
this woman was just luxuriating in the tub because she really did need to be taken away. And that's really what yoga is about. That's what all kinds of self-development and spiritual practice and living well, I think, is about. It's take us away from the stuff that's so difficult to deal with, refresh us, and then put us back out there. There's a beautiful yogic prayer and chant that oftentimes you'll hear at the end of a yoga class, and it's lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from fear of death to knowledge of immortality. And I think that just sums up a lot. It's like lead us from the unreal to the real. And you can figure out with your own worldview, what that is. But I think there's a lot. There's a lot, especially now in the era of fake news and everybody having an opinion and plastering it all over social media as if it were the God's honest truth, that we have to just be so aware of lead me from the unreal to the real.
Yeah. Okay, there have been a lot of books written on yoga, the exercise and yoga, the spiritual practice. Why did you feel that you needed to add your voice to create this book? What's the Victoria Moran spin?
Well, I think that's really why I wanted to write it. I did want to put the Victoria Moran spin on it because I have been doing yoga for a very long time. In fact, I discovered yoga. I'd heard of it, but back then it was just this weird foreign thing. And maybe it was a fermented milk product and maybe it was standing on your head, but whatever it was just weird, stay away. But at 17, so we're talking 1967, I found 3 books in the Kansas City, Missouri Public Library about yoga. And they absolutely fascinated me because I was a practicing binge eater. I was overweight and I hated exercise, hated gym class and all that stuff. Here was this beautiful system that was about spirituality, which had always fascinated me. Always, always. I mean, my Beatles fan club pen pal asked what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said, I want to be a mystic. So that was always in there. And then here comes yoga that says, yeah, you get to be a mystic and you get to bring your body along. And just how it is, whatever the size, whatever the fitness level, you bring your body, and these positions that you're going to put yourself into in hatha yoga, which is just a very small part of yoga, is going to also help you find out who you are. I mean, the whole thing was just utterly fascinating and amazing. Then I moved to London on my 18th birthday, where there was a lot more yoga, a lot more vegetarianism. That's where I became vegetarian, found my first actual yoga teacher. And she's such a role model. Estella, I just was looking at the book this morning to prepare for talking with you. And I see that I say, well, she's 98. Well, now she's 99. She still teaches 1 yoga class a week. She lives on the 3rd floor walk up. Amazing, amazing woman. So all this has been part of my life all along. And it's always been in there. And it's touched on in many of my other books. But as one of the publishers who passed on this one said, Victoria is a vegan and general spirituality author. She has no platform in yoga. So that's why the kind of big and medium publishers that have published most of my other books didn't want this one, because I am not doing variations of downward dog on Instagram. So that means that all these 50 plus years of doing yoga and being in the spiritual teachings of yoga don't really count. So thank goodness for beautiful people who can see beyond the first blush. And that's what these people at Monkfish Books, beautiful spiritual publishing house here in the Hudson Valley in New York, they're like, ooh, we like this.
Oh, good.
So yeah, so Age Like a Yogi will be book number 14. And it's special because it's everything that I've spent my life discovering and working on and working with. And it also ties together things that I have found not only fascinating, but genuinely helpful. So that's yoga philosophy, related spiritual philosophy, Ayurvedic self-care, which is just so much fun, especially as you get older, and vegan ethics and plant-based nutrition. they all come together in Age Like a Yogi. And I feel that anybody that steps onto this path is going to be really happy 10 years from now that they did.
Because they're going to be like, they haven't aged
Well, we're going
or
to
aged as
age. I mean,
fast.
that's just a thing. But to age more slowly in terms of what we think of the negative aspects of aging, and to be able to, as we were talking about acceptance, accept the parts that aren't so hot. And you can see this. One of the things that I think is so important for aging well is to have role models who are really acing it. And you just kind of see, I mean, I see it with some of these wonderful Hollywood stars. And, it's just like they were always wearing, the strapless, and then it becomes the little cap sleeve, and then it becomes the longer sleeve. And nothing like, getting up and having an Oprah moment and saying, okay, everybody, my arms are all flabby. Therefore, you will not be seeing them at the awards shows this season. No, they just very gently and classily come out with the great gown that has sleeves.
And they look fabulous and
And
they
they
feel
look
good.
fabulous. Yeah.
Right.
And also that it's not so much about how we look. I mean, everybody wants to look decent. And we don't want to leave a group of friends and believe that all they're talking about is how much older we look than last time they saw us. That's no fun. But the reality of how we feel growing older, of what's really going on, is what's happening systemically, how we are health-wise. And then even beyond that is how we are in that deepest internal part of ourselves that I happen to believe will go on from here to another adventure.
Okay, we hear a lot about yoga and yoga principles outside of exercise as well. There are some people that try and profit or capitalize on it, make it because it's trendy. They'll focus on specific things. I get to review a lot of programs for an organization. I vet them to decide if they're worth promoting or affiliating with. And most of them, not some of them, most of them really turn me off. Some of them talk about Ayurveda and they'll talk about doshas. And I thought we could get into doshas because there's a part of me that doesn't want to be pigeonholed into, oh, you're this, and so you're going to act this way and need this. And I took the Banyan Botanicals quiz, and I was mostly Peta, but some of the others, you could see that.
I know I sound like the guy at the bar that says you're a Gemini, but I mean, you just look Pitta. There's the red hair. That's kind of a giveaway, and you have this lovely build that I can tell you can maintain muscle mass more easily than a lot of people, and you seem Pitta.
Anyway, I imagine that if you go to a practitioner and work with someone, they're going to be a little more involved than a quiz that you get online in order to determine who you are and what you may need and what's necessary to bring you into balance. But why do you think it works? How has it worked for you?
I have found it was such a gift. I discovered Ayurveda, I mean, almost 30 years after yoga. And that's interesting because Ayurveda didn't get out of India until many years after yoga. What happened was when the British colonized, they didn't mess with anything that seemed at all religious. So yoga just got to be what yoga was. And there was a cross-pollination of ideas between the English-speaking world and India. And so yoga was getting out there. So was vegetarianism. That was why so many of the Brits in the 1700s and 1800s were going vegetarian and getting that wonderful idea seeded in the West. But Ayurveda, because it was cultural, they didn't want to mess with anything religious because they didn't want uprisings. But the cultural stuff they were going to smash down, as good colonizers would. So Ayurveda didn't start getting its act together again until after 1947 when India became independent. So I learned about it in Deepak Chopra's, I think it was his first book, Perfect Health. And I've read it, 30 times, I'm sure. It's been extremely helpful. And again, you take what you like and leave the rest. I'm a vegan. And there are things in there that aren't vegan. So, not going to take that part. For me, I was very surprised when I learned my dosha because the dosha that I have, people tend to be thin and kind of delicate and kind of dancer-like. And because I had had the binge eating disorder my whole young life, I'd always been heavy. And what was interesting for me when I went vegan back in 1983, I'd tried all through the 70s, and I had periods of being vegan, but I finally made it in the early 80s. And then the weight just came off without my doing anything about it. And what I discovered underneath that was really small bones and this kind of delicate thing. Now, I'm a Vata Pitta, so I'm a combo. So I'm not like Audrey Hepburn and Fred Astaire. I don't have long, gracious fingers and all that. But generally speaking, I am Vata and prone to the difficulties and also the benefits of that body type. So to know oneself in a physical way, to me, that's what finding out about your dosha makeup. There are three doshas. We've mentioned Vata and Pitta. There's another one called Kapha. And everybody is all of these things. And the idea is not to be 33 and a third of each. The idea is to be exactly what you are. Your dosha imprint happened at the moment of conception, and it's perfect. And maybe I'm looking here at Caryn Hartglass, so let's just pretend that she's 60% Pitta and 30% Kapha and 10% Vata. Okay, whatever. Well, that looks like, oh my gosh, she's really out of balance. No, she's not. She's perfect because 60, 30, 10 is exactly what she needs to be. However, somebody with more of a Pitta dominance like Caryn might tend to get a little bit angry and upset if they're out of balance, if they've been working too hard, if it's summertime and it's hot, and then they go out and they eat Mexican food and they're just overheated, they might kind of explode. They might also get inflammatory conditions, skin breakouts, ulcers, this sort of thing. So what somebody like that would need to do is just bring that pitta down, because maybe it's gotten up to 65, 70%. And you bring down pitta by cooling largely. So cucumbers, watermelons, rest, cool breezes, gentle exercise, these kinds of things that are just kind of like, ah. And then you get back in your own perfect balance. And I love this concept because I come from the era when very few people, very few women were told that they had the right bodies. Because at that time, we were all supposed to be tall, skinny, and flat chested like the models. And then somewhere in there, you're still supposed to be tall and skinny, but then you were supposed to have very large breasts. And it's like, oh my gosh, how can we do all these things? It is so difficult to be perfect. And then along comes Ayurveda saying, excuse me, you were perfect at the moment of your design, and all you have to do is match that. So it's a relief. That's why I like doshas. And a lot of the quizzes are very good. And if you do go to an Ayurvedic practitioner, they will give you one of those quizzes. And then they will also do a very advanced kind of pulse diagnosis. And I know they do some of this in Chinese medicine as well. But with the pulse diagnosis, a practitioner can determine exactly not only your doshic makeup, but what's out of balance at any given time. And then you also, and this is what's so cool about growing older, Ayurveda suggests that the seasons are doshic. So there are times of year when we want to pay attention to one dosha more than another, regardless of our own personal doshic makeup. But also there are seasons of life. And so as we get to be in the kind of 55 and older sort of age group, everybody, regardless of what they were born with, gets to be more vata. And if you can take care of that, if you can pacify that vata, it really does seem like a kind of miracle for aging slowly.
Okay, now let's delve in a little bit into the food category. So something that I love that you wrote about spices. I want to get into spices because they're so spicy.
Mhm.
But you wrote, if you've traveled to a part of the world where spices are grown, the sensory spectacle of the marketplace is etched in your psyche forever. And this is so true. I remember I was working for an Israeli company in 1988. I think it was 1988. I went and visited Israel in 1984. So now I'm trying to figure out, it was probably when I went with my sister. So maybe it's not totally etched in my memory, but we went to one of these traditional marketplaces, and there was the spices, the people selling spices, and it was just this artistic burst of so many colors, all these bags like overflowing with color. It was just this giant palette of so many colors, and they were all spices. It's just amazing, as opposed to going to your supermarket and getting a little jar.
Yeah.
And it just triggered something within me, like I need to be among these spices.
Yeah, I have a memory like that too. I don't even remember now what country it was. I did a lot of traveling in Asia in the 90s, so it might have been Nepal or India or some part of China. But it's the sight, the colors that you talk about, and the smell, it's just with me for forever. And we know, of course, that the spices are so full of antioxidants. They're the most concentrated source of antioxidants on the planet. And it used to be, I didn't know what to do with them. They were kind of intimidating, sort of like, I don't know if you remember way back in the day, maybe if you were like me, the dark leafy greens were just so intimidating. It's like I would go past the produce section and, I'd get my lettuce and spinach maybe, but then there'd be all these other leaves and some of them were great big. It's like, what do you do with that? And so I just didn't eat them until I found out how amazing they are for us. But spices, it was the same way. And I used to keep my winter spices in the freezer and get them out for Christmas cookies and mulled cider. And then I'd put them back in the freezer. And now, of course, I'm just going through that stuff like crazy and use them all the time. And in Ayurveda, they talk about not only what we know, the antioxidants, the phytochemicals, but that there are elements within these spices that are very balancing and that can balance out our doshas and get us more in tune with nature. And when we're vibrationally in tune with nature, we're going to be calmer, we're going to feel better, and we're going to be healthier.
I know I mentioned to you, Victoria, that I'm on this SOS free diet, salt, oil, sugar free, and I'm not saying it's for everyone, but it's definitely for me and it's working. I'm happy.
Good deal.
But without salt, you have to really make an effort to find the things that make food really mouthwatering and flavorful. And that's the spices, the herbs and the spices. Maybe a little lemon juice and vinegar, and I'm happy.
Yeah, you kind of get used to being stimulated. And then when that stimulant goes away, it takes some time to get back.
Yeah. And just one more thing I want to add, just because I feel like talking about it, is, and maybe this is not true for everyone, but I've been doing this now for 4 months, 5 months, 4 months. And I really have no cravings. I have a bunch of sugar and vegan butter in my cabinets and refrigerator. And I thought, I got to get rid of this. So I made a pile of cookies to bring to our building party yesterday. And I still have some left over, but I had no desire to eat them, which is really amazing.
Yeah.
And the gingerbread, I made gingerbread cookies with the wonderful ginger and nutmeg and just loved the smells of it. I didn't need to eat them.
Yeah, well, you can put it on your oatmeal or
Yeah,
in your
exactly.
Indian chocolate shake. Most mornings I have this Indian chocolate shake for breakfast, and it's got cloves, nutmeg, cinnamon, allspice, cardamom, ginger, and the original recipe from a book called The Ayurvedic Vegan Kitchen by Talia Lutzker
Mm-hmm.
actually has some cayenne pepper in it.
Oh,
I don't put that in there, but there's something about all those spices that even though it's made in a blender and it's not warm, it's warming.
mm.
So all through the year, it's just such a nice way to start the day. And we just find ways to use the spices. Just throw some in, whatever you're making.
I did interview Talia when that book came out, but I forgot about it. And so when I saw the recipe in your book, I pulled it out, put it on a notepad. It's like, yeah, that's for me. I don't know if that's for Pitta people, but it's for me.
Yeah, it's actually it's tridoshik. This is an interesting thing. It kind of confuses people sometimes. It's like, oh my gosh, if everybody's got a different dosha, how am I going to feed my family? And what? And but you know what? Simplicity. That's just, to me, the whole essence of this thing is a big old exhale, like, you know, whatever you're doing now, however you're living now, it's just fine because it's where you are now. And if you want to make a change, cool, but you want to make it in a way that doesn't fluster and frustrate you. Now, this might be different if you're dealing with a serious acute health problem and you
Mm.
have to do radical things overnight. But for most people, you can kind of ease into these things, kind of breathe into these things. And this is one of the things about balancing vata, which is kind of the Ayurvedic prescription for everybody as they're in the sort of post-menopausal and beyond years. And that is to just keep yourself comfortable. So vata tends to be cold, and older people tend to get cold. I could never understand, why are all the old people in Florida and Arizona? Oh, now I get it. And so wherever you are, if you feel cold, put on a sweater, put on a wrap, wear a nice cozy little cap covering your ears. It's your being comfortable counts, and it matters, and it's not selfish, and it's not silly, because your being comfortable reflects that you're taking care of yourself. And what could be more important than that? So you want to be warm. You want to be hydrated. And Ayurveda is not big on guzzling water all day long. They do recommend that you guzzle first thing in the morning. So
Mm.
12 to 16, maybe even 24 ounces of water for a larger person, maybe with a lemon in it or some sliced ginger. Hot, warm, or room temperature. Ayurveda does not like cold beverages, certainly never iced, because that puts out Agni, the digestive fire, and digestion is really, really critical for health. So the recommendation is to drink a lot of water first thing in the morning, and then throughout the day, sipping. And a lot of people who are into Ayurveda will have these beautiful thermoses. They'll just take them with them everywhere. And they've got, the ginger tea or the hot water. And then during meals, you just sip a little bit of water. You don't want to douse your digestive fire. And then the third recommendation that I'll suggest for keeping Vata calm is to have a daily routine. It's called dinacharya in Ayurveda. And it's basically that you get up early and you go to bed early and you eat really early so that you're not digesting food in the night when you're supposed to be detoxing. And that you see the sunlight, or if you can't see sunlight, then one of those seasonal affective disorder kind of lights first thing in the morning, because we want to regulate our circadian rhythm. In Ayurveda, when you do things is almost as important as that you do them. And then finally, in terms of daily routine, it's when we eat. So Ayurveda suggests breakfast, 8:30 or earlier, so that you are hungry again for your biggest meal of the day in the middle of the day. According to Ayurveda, Agni, digestive fire, is hottest at midday. So that's when you want to have your main meal. And I know that's difficult for people that work in an office and have limited amount of time. So you do the best you can, maybe a little bit bigger lunch, a little bit smaller dinner. And ideally, that final meal of the day is more of a supper, which comes from the same root as supplement. So where you're going to supplement all the wonderful nourishment you got in your first two meals of the day with a little easily digestible meal in the evening. And this means that you're going to bed kind of free and clear, and you're not going to wake up in the morning with what in Ayurveda they call ama, metabolic debris, just leftover stuff that wasn't taken care of back when it should have been. And when you start just these few little habits, and certainly when you combine them with a whole food plant-based diet, which is already, put you light years ahead of most people, you're probably going to notice some really wonderful effects. I know that I have.
Yeah, there's a big difference. I know when I go to a party and eat late at night and eat too much and come home and sleep the next morning, does not feel the same as when I didn't do that.
Yeah. I mean, I've never had a hangover from alcohol, but I think it's a food hangover,
it's
and I've
similar.
had plenty of those.
Yeah. We began the program talking about acceptance and moving on. And part of that has to do with death and dying, which is part of life. When we're born, we are given the ultimatum that we're going to die. That's just part of the package. But our society does not handle it well. And we could really use some better tools to manage dying. And you've got them.
Well, part of it, I think, is making peace with who we are. And we're always going to believe what we believe, and not everybody believes that there's life after death or whatever. So if that's the worldview, then it's essential that you do everything you can to have this incredibly rich, full life and leave a legacy, so that that's what's going on. If you're more a little bit woo-woo like me, then the idea that this little span of life is all there is, it just doesn't compute. It never has for me. When I learned yoga philosophy, that was great because it was the philosophy I already had kind of innately, and also because I had a pretty interesting nanny when I was little, and she raised me with reincarnation and some other things that I think my parents didn't know were going to be part of the package. And so it's this idea of living well and trusting that that will also relate to dying well. And so some of the preparation, I think, is very, very deeply spiritual. And I talk in the book about, in the Bhagavad Gita, there are these very clear directions on what to do at the time of death. And it's inhaling and focusing on your heart, exhaling the sacred sound of Om, and imagining this divinity that is your true self that's been living in your heart, coming out through the top of your head, through this crown chakra. And I just love the idea that somebody's given me some instructions for what
how
to
to
do
die
when I'm dying. And then part of it is just really practical, arranging for things to be as close to the way you would want them, if possible, that there can be. I mean, I wrote a book back in 1997 called Shelter for the Spirit. It's about making your home your spiritual center, basically. And there are appendices in the back of the book about working at home, having a home birth, and dying at home. And so I've done the first two. Oh, homeschooling, that was the other one. I did the first three. My daughter homeschooled, and I haven't died at home yet. And I hope when the time comes, I will be able to die at home. So, you got to do all those living wills and all that stuff to put as much in place as possible to hedge your bets for what can happen at the end of life.
Mm.
But regardless of what happens, and there's only so much we can plan for because so much of life is out of our hands, but to just know that this essence that you are has always been there, that you came here for a reason. You're living a remarkable life. Just because you're listening to this podcast means you are an extraordinary person doing extraordinary things. And whatever you leave behind is just going to keep on sparkling.
Let's just breathe that in, shall we? That feels good. Because right now, and it's always right now, the world seems to be in great turmoil. And the planet has gone through different periods of turmoil since humans have arrived. And I don't know what happened before, and I'm not exactly sure what happened before me, but we have access to science and history to get a feel for what's happened before us. But right now, we have numerous wars and conflicts, and we have a political climate in the United States and in other countries that is scary to many of us who have experienced great freedom and democracy and now seems to be backing into a more authoritative regime. And we have a change of government coming in January, which I've talked a lot about, and I'm not looking forward to it. How do we make the most of our life when all of this around us is so out of our control?
Well, I think that is really where yoga and truly any spiritual practice, because at the center of all spiritual traditions, yoga is not a religion, but it has a lot in common with Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism. But within all these, within Christianity, there's mysticism. Within Judaism, there's Kabbalah. Within Islam, there's Sufism. There is at the heart of these teachings something that Aldous Huxley called the perennial philosophy, this idea that we are all connected, that life has meaning. And so I think we go forth with that, regardless of what's going on around us, because the truth that's within us is the ultimate truth, and it's the most important thing. And then I think, in terms of looking around in the world and what are we going to do with what we see, I'm thinking it's trying to find ways to get in with something that we agree on. And I know that a lot of people are looking at their friends and relatives and saying, gosh, I don't think I agree with you about one thing. Well, you do. You probably love the same baby or the same dog. You start somewhere. And in terms of the new administration, I think so much is unknown. I don't know that anybody can really say anything now and have a lot of solidity to what they say, but I'm interested as a vegan and as a plant-based person that there are people in this new administration who are talking about health, and they're talking about getting certain chemical additives removed from food that are not allowed in the EU and other places. And that's good.
That's good. Would seem like a no-brainer.
They're in this MAHA, Make America Healthy Again initiative that they have that's largely RFK Jr., and I think some of the others are chiming in as well. When it comes to nutrition, the influence there seems to come from a kind of Weston Price philosophy. And I don't know if your listeners are familiar with the Weston Price Foundation. They're this very anti-vegetarian group, which I find just so interesting. It's like, well, if you don't want to be vegetarian, don't be one. But I mean, why be so anti? But anyway, they are. And I don't know if anybody close to the administration comes from that organization or not. But what I'm seeing online is raw milk and fertilized eggs and grass-fed beef
Mm.
and all these things that are hearkening back to an earlier time. I don't think there are many people alive, if anybody, who really goes back as far as these people want to go in talking about food and how people ate. So as vegans, I think we always need to look at the non-vegans, I almost call them the opposition, but I won't, and see what they're arguing about. And having been around this for 50 years, including my times when I was slipping and sliding and wasn't quite vegan myself, but still, it's changed. And now it looks like they're saying things like, if your doctor tells you to eat this, and then they'll show a picture of a carton of non-dairy milk and a package of Beyond Burgers and a
Mm.
package of tofu instead of this. And then they show whole milk in a glass bottle. I haven't seen whole milk in a glass bottle
Yeah,
since I
right.
was 10 years old. Um, and a piece of beef and a carton of eggs, hearkening back to when people ate this kind of food, people were happy. And
Mhm.
now they want you to eat this other kind of food that isn't what your mother fed you, and it's not going to make you happy, and it's processed and all that. So I think we somehow need to explore the concept of food styles. And I would encourage anyone who's interested in this to take a look at one of my websites, which is mainstreetvegan.com, and just click on blog and look for the one that says food styles. It's a couple of years old, but I walked into this restaurant, and I mean, it was just awful. It was like rock, and the chairs were sort of rock, and the colors were all sort of grayish beige. I mean, it's like, what is this, Rikers Island? No, it was a super hip, trendy restaurant where you would go and suffer through the discomfort of the environment to be where all the cool people were going. And it happened to be vegan, so I liked it. But as I looked around, I noticed nobody else was vegan. In fact, somebody at the next table was talking about having gone big game hunting. It's like, what are
Mm.
you doing eating vegan food? But whatever. And that was when it hit me. These people's food style was hipster. They wanted to be cool more than they didn't care if it was vegan or not. They wanted to be cool. But there are other people who want to be traditional, and there are other people who want to be natural, and there are other people who want to be gourmet. And so if you find out where people's food style is, then when you approach them with the idea of plant-based eating, you can go in through their door. So this administration and the MAHA thing, they're somewhere between traditionalist and naturalist. They want to go hunting and they want to have a Norman Rockwell Thanksgiving. So somehow we've got to figure out how to package plant-based in that way. And you and I were talking before the show that we went to this lovely party about nut milk making and making your own. And I think that's the kind of thing that we can talk about and have maybe some camaraderie with people with whom we might disagree on a whole lot else.
Excellent. Okay, but now you mentioned the Nama milk maker. Can we just talk about that for a minute? Because we don't have much time left. But I remember being invited to this event and I was excited about it. And when I got there, I was even more excited because Victoria Moran was there. And we got to spend this delightful morning where they were making these wonderful hot beverages. I had a pistachio milk matcha. Oh my God, it was amazing. And then these little bites, and most of it was vegan or near vegan. You could make it vegan. And they showed us how their milk maker worked. And then we all got one.
I know, pretty nice, isn't
It
it?
was amazing. I'm enjoying mine. I haven't used it that often, but I want to make more soy milk. And I've made it once in there, and it made a difference, made a positive difference.
How do you make soy milk in there? I haven't even tried that.
Right.
I'm so literal. When something says nut milk maker, I'm like, okay, this is for making nut milk. And then we get somebody creative like you, and you're going to make soy milk in there. That's so cool.
So the first thing I made in there was almond milk, and I
Right.
soaked my
That's easy.
almonds,
Yeah.
and they say you don't have to soak them, but I like soaking them, and then I made it, and it was really nice because I normally use a nut milk bag, which is messy and time consuming, and this machine is brilliantly designed, and it gets as much of the liquid out, and you're left with a very dry pulp that you can use for all kinds of fun other things. And it even comes with a neat little container to store your dry pulp. And then I decided, okay, I've got to try the soy milk. Now I got into making soy milk during the pandemic. And so I knew the things that I had to do. So typically what you do is soak the soybeans, and then you can blend them first or cook them first, and then put them through a nut milk bag and make the milk. And what I learned from Miyoka Shinner is not to soak the beans because it gives it a very beany paint-like taste. So I just take a big pot of water, I boil it, I throw the beans in there for like a minute, and then I take them out and drain them. And then I just put them in the almond milk maker.
Wow. So you take the beans and kind of turn them into nuts and make the milk.
Exactly. And then you have to warm up the milk again
Yeah.
once it's done, but that cut out some difficult steps. Anyway, so I have enjoyed that.
Aw.
But we're really out of time.
Oh, shucks. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. What a pleasure always.
Yes, so it's lovely seeing you here and spending time with you, talking about your book, Age Like a Yogi, a heavenly path to a dazzling third act. I
And
wish you a dazzling third act.
may,
Lots of
may I
love.
just
Yes,
offer something to your listeners?
please.
Age Like a Yogi is currently on pre-order, and pre-order means the world to books and authors these days. So if you take a look at it and you feel like it's something that you would like to purchase, if you do that, if you send your receipt to assist@victoriamoran.com, then you are invited, and you will get an invitation and a Zoom link to an all-day Age Like a Yogi retreat on January 12th. If you're not available that day, it is recorded. We'll send you the recording. And in addition, you get the Age Like a Yogi e-cookbook. So happy to offer those perks, and thanks for taking a look at Age Like a Yogi.
Okay, once again, sending you love, sending everyone love, because it is all about love.
And
There you
food.
go. Okay, take care, and everybody have a delicious week.